Live from our hurricane headquarters with real-time analysis from some of the nation's top meteorologists, this is Tracking the Tropics, powered by Bose Electric.
Despite all the uproar on social media, there will not be an election day hurricane in the United States. The NHC tracking this depression with a moderate chance of formation, but with the model showing no impacts in our neck of the woods. We are live on Tracking the Tropics to break down everything that you need to know between now and Election Day with our team of meteorologists. Let's bring in meteorologist Rebecca Barry there in the top right, and our featured meteorologist today joining us from WGNO in New Orleans, Louisiana, Brantley Kike. Great to have Brantley once again back on the program. All eyes are on this depression here in the center of your screen. My eyes will be on the comment section to answer any questions that you have using our hashtag system, hashtag #HeyBrantley, hashtag #HeyRebecca, or hashtag #HeyJB. So, Rebecca, I'll be looking for comments. You can take it away. This is really the one thing we're focused on today, right?
Absolutely. And so we've been laser focused on this for longer than we should have been because everyone on social media started posting a single picture of a single model run showing devastation, on Election Day in Florida. I'm sure you saw some of the wild social media posts that have been flying around about the system. And what we said about it and how we addressed it when it initially came up was yes, there is a chance for something to develop in the Caribbean, but this time of the year, it's extremely difficult for any of that to grow really strong. And it's also extremely difficult for that to head into the Gulf because of wind shear. This time of the year, by the second cold front in October, we call that kind of shutting down the Gulf because at that point we get into a pattern where more cold fronts follow and the overall weather pattern is just not conducive for systems to move into the Gulf. Now, what we're seeing now with forecast models is that it does still have the potential to form, but it would do exactly what we kind of thought it might, which is slide out into the open Atlantic. And so let's take a look at the two main forecast models that we like to rely on. This is the Euro, making it through Thursday, Friday, and finally seeing a little bit of rotation over the weekend there. And so that's kind of what the Euro is showing. Some very weaker broad rotation to the south of Cuba. And this is over the weekend. And so not even really forming yet at this point. A lot of tropical moisture, pretty messy, pretty typical for what we do expect in this region this time of the year. And so if you were to watch the longer term Euros, the ones that do push it out towards Puerto Rico and out into the open Atlantic if they run out that long. This is the GFS, which has kind of been the pain in our side for the past week or so, because this is the system that most aggressively develops, it most consistently develops it, and initially showed the system pushing into the Gulf, which we knew would be very unlikely to happen. Now the GFS showing some broad formation and moving out into the open Atlantic, possibly kind of dancing along off the coast of Florida before moving on, but no real impact, not really strengthening into anything too strong. And so this is kind of what we expect to end up playing out as we discussed before. It would take some major changes in the current weather pattern for any system to enter the Gulf. And so looking at it, it does look like exactly what we expected we might see if we do see some development. The next name on the list is Patty, and we may actually end up running through Patty. And of course, if you believe the long-term GFS, we call them GFSicanes. It does have a GFSicane or two that's just a fish storm after that. So it's possible to see more, but it's just less and less likely. And it's certainly less and less likely that we'd see anything of any actual impact. So I know Brantley kind of on board with the same message.
Yeah, overall, not too concerned right now. I mean, a lot of people have been really concerned over the past few weeks, and, we understand it. People have storm fatigue, especially in Florida, where they've been hit a couple of times this year, but there's really just no need to panic. There's no cause for alarm right now. We're still at just a moderate chance for development, still at 40% like it has been for a few days. And like Rebecca was just saying, we have some models that show this thing, likely becoming Patty, but this time of the year, we have so many cold fronts coming through that the steering patterns just sort of change a little bit, and that really protects the Gulf a little bit more so than what we would see in August and September and even the first part of October. Now that we're getting closer to the end of October into November, usually these cold fronts help kind of steer things away from the Gulf. So that looks like that's what's going to happen here, at least according to the models that we have today.
I see some activity in our comment section. Again, you can use our hashtag system if you want to ask a question, but I think it's mostly just a big exhale in our comment section. Not too many questions, just people that are relieved to know that the depression that we are monitoring here from the NHC, that this is not heading in a more northward direction. Brantley, I'm just curious. I want to bring in Obviously the fact that you're joining us from WGNO from New Orleans, Louisiana. What is the general sentiment with this hurricane season on a whole for the New Orleans area? Obviously, New Orleans has been battered. Really, the northern Gulf Coast has been battered by storms in recent years, including with that record year that we had in 2020. Really, if I'm looking this correctly, most of the impacts for you this year have been with Francine. Is there the general feeling that this is a win for the New Orleans area to not get that many storms like we've seen in previous seasons?
Oh, yeah. I think just because of how many storms Louisiana has seen between, 2020 and now, so many people are really, breathing a sigh of relief that we haven't seen so many back-to-back storms. In 2020 and 2021, we has had back-to-back-to-back storms hitting the state. So people were just constantly on edge. And this year, they were able to kind of take a step back. I know people were on edge for Francine and then shortly after because we still had a lot of activity going on in the Gulf and in the Caribbean. But at least for the month of August, it was unusually quiet. And now things have been very quiet for the Gulf so far this month. So I think people are breathing a little bit easier this year in comparison to the past few years. And I think a lot of people are also grateful that Francine wasn't worse than what it was. We didn't see a ton of rapid intensification there. It was sort of a lopsided storm when it came through. So I think we really lucked out so far this season when it comes to named storms hitting our area.
So, Rebecca, we're almost through hurricane season. We're getting closer.
Absolutely. And so I put up the average tropical activity, that green arrow where we are moving along that line there. And so we are about to cross into the final month of hurricane season, which is November. We've only had 3 landfalling systems in the state of Florida in November. The most recent was Nicole in 2022. And so I just feel like people are sighing a big sigh of relief. I think it's safe to sigh that big sigh of relief. We'll keep an eye on it. We'll let you know if something crazy happens. But as far as the season goes, I am also relaxing a little bit, which is nice.
Mm-hmm. And, sometimes we do get November storms, especially sometimes when we have these low pressure systems that come along with cold fronts that sort of stall out over the Gulf. It does happen on occasion, but so far we haven't seen a ton of cold fronts coming through, and the ones that we have seen haven't had a lot of moisture. So good signs so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Those cold front lows can be a little sneaky. So I'm happy that the cold fronts aren't quite cranking across the Gulf just yet.
I want to bring up, we'll talk about the end of the season here in just a moment. We have, of course, more episodes of Tracking the Tropics to talk about the chance of a November tropical storm or even a hurricane in November or even December. We will be getting to that in the weeks ahead. But I want to stay with the depression for a moment. We've got a question coming in, and it comes in from Tina on Facebook Live. Again, you can use the hashtag to ask a question to our team. Tina says, hashtag AJB. Will the developing storm ahead to Puerto Rico? We should probably just talk about, impacts from this storm, Rebecca, areas that could get hit.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's still a little too soon to tell if this is going to end up being a more compact, stronger system, or if it's just going to be a broad area of tropical moisture. And so I'm playing through the European model with an eye on Puerto Rico there, just so you can see how much rain they're getting even well away from the system before it develops. And so this is kind of the tail end of rainy season for Central America, and that also includes the islands there. And so with the European, and then now let's check out the GFS, you can see how rainy it is even before, during, and after a system may develop there. And so I know our bilingual weathercaster, Val, has been, posting updates because there is such a high interest for the islands on if this develops or if this doesn't. And the messaging has been the same, that it's still an incredible amount of rain this time of the year. Most of the islands are built to handle this amount of rain. The GFS is the most aggressive and puts the DR and Puerto Rico kind of right in the center there of the formation area, and the dirty side of that storm would come with quite a bit of storm surge. But I don't think this would be anything like some of the storms that they've seen from past seasons where those Category 5 swipe right over them, or those more major hurricane category systems affect the island. So I don't think it's too much to worry about. It's probably not going to be a nice day, though.
Let's go to the next question. It comes in from David, hashtag Hey Rebecca. Can we say, I'll bring you guys both in for this one, wanting to know, all right, do you consider this to be a busy hurricane season? We have talked on previous episodes that all it takes is one storm hitting your region of the country for it to feel like a busy season. But when you look at the the numbers and the season overall, Rebecca, Brantley, do you consider this to be a busy season?
Go ahead, Brantley.
Yeah, I mean, I still would say that this is an above average season. I think that a lot of people back in August, when we had that unusually quiet period, I think people were kind of skeptical about the long range hurricane season forecast, and then really things started cranking up in September and continuing into October. So, like we've been saying, it just goes to show it's just one storm. That's all it takes to really cause a lot of devastation, especially with Helene. You can see how far inland those impacts went. But overall, I think that we are right there, just above the average. So I think things are a little bit busier than normal when it comes to named storms and hurricanes and major hurricanes.
And my hope moving forward is that the meteorological community can find a better way to convey, because the word busy is so interesting in the modern satellite era, because we do name storms that last less than 24 hours, that don't end up impacting any areas of land, you know, those fish storms that we talk about. And so in the modern era, we name a lot more systems than we used to. And so it seems like every season feels pretty busy, especially when you look at how many of those storms we end up naming and talking about. Whereas I hope we find a more meaningful way to describe impactful storms, because we had so many highly impactful systems this year, especially with Helene, especially with Milton, especially with Beryl. And so I just hope that we can, moving forward as a community, can find a better way to convey those types of impacts so that people are a little less concentrated on the number of systems we saw.
Yeah, it's something that we've talked about on previous episodes, no doubt. We hope that we don't get too much deeper into the alphabet, and if we do, that those storms are well out to sea. But we'll keep you posted, folks, in the weeks ahead on the potential for a patty, to form with this particular system, or even a system that we track into the weeks into November. As a reminder, hurricane season does extend into the month of November, past Thanksgiving. So we'll be, of course, continuing to produce episodes every Tuesday. Before I let our two meteorologists go, we did talk about how, of course, we led the episode with that there is not going to be an election day hurricane. We've seen the social media nonsense about how
so much nonsense.
Oh my goodness, that storms are manufactured for particular times of the year. There is going to be no election day tropical storm or hurricane. Right now, we are tracking this in the, of course, really to our south. But again, as Rebecca noted in her forecast, moving out into the Atlantic. But I want to ask both of you, because this is our last tracking the tropics between now and election day, in your respective regions, us here in Tampa, Florida, Rebecca, and Brantley, you there in New Orleans, Louisiana. What's it looking like for election day? What are we expecting in our region of the country?
Well, so far, election day over here is looking really nice. It has been unusually warm in New Orleans. We've not seen any rain here for weeks and weeks. The grass is getting crunchy. It's, usually by now we've seen that those first couple of really strong cold fronts come through, and we're still hitting like 85 to 88 degrees during the day. Usually we would be in the mid 70s by now. So it's looking more like late summer than early fall for election day, but we are expecting a lot of sunshine here. So the weather is looking pretty good when people head to the polls.
And I'm so glad that the weather looks nice there. It looks pretty nice here as well. We've had we call it Chamber of Commerce weather this time of the year, when we get a little bit of a lower humidity than our summertime levels. Now, it is on the warm side during the afternoon hours, but we don't see any fronts off in the distance, because this time of the year, to really get a rainy day, we would need a front to push through if we were going to get some nasty weather. And right now, nothing looking like that in the near future. So the fingers crossed election day goes smoothly for all.
Right at the end, as we were getting ready to wrap the episode, we got in we're going to get in these last two questions for our meteorologists. Again, here with Brantley Kike from WGNO, Rebecca Barry from WFLA. Mitchell wants to know, #Hey Rebecca, how long after a depression is detected can a spaghetti model be rendered in hopes of tracking a path? Does it have to get to invest status before spaghetti models
and
come
this
out?
is not even a depression yet. This is just an area of disturbed weather. So it may eventually become a depression. And so the hierarchy is area that we're watching. That's what we're doing right now. And the next step would be the National Hurricane Center wants to start investigating this. And that's when it becomes an invest product. So that's when you get Invest 98L or whatever that designation is. And at that point, forecast models start running. The spaghetti models you're talking about, Hurricane Hunter flights may start flying through it. And when it's that invest status is when we start getting that sort of information. Depression is actually above that. And so if they find a circulation, that's when they go to depression status, and then it goes up from there to tropical storm to hurricane. And so we have that weird potential tropical cyclone designation in there when it's not yet a depression, but it's close enough to land that they need to start issuing watches and warnings. So that's kind of the hierarchy, and we have not even made it to invest or depression status just yet.
And I'll bring this up for both of you. Renee wants to know, will Hurricane Milton be retired? Undoubtedly, it will be retired. But what's the process look like, Brantley and Rebecca, as far as them retiring a storm name?
Yeah, and so it's not immediate, even though we know that they retire particularly deadly or damaging storms. It's done over the summer at a conference. And so they meet at the conference and they decide which names they're going to retire. And then they also consider what names to replace them with. And that's a more complicated process than you might think, because the lists alternate between male and female, between the A and B names each year. And then the next year it's the opposite. And also they're looking to be more inclusive with the new names that they add to the list. You may have noticed some names with a Hispanic heritage over the last couple of years, like Isaias, that replaced some of the I names. And also, just based on the time of the year, some letters get replaced more often because we typically hit those letters during the peak of the season. So we're going to start running real short on I names within the next couple of years, most likely.
I, J, and K are like the most common ones.
Yeah.
Brantley, anything to add before we wrap it up? You're our featured meteorologist today, again, joining us from WGO in New Orleans.
Well, I think, something for us to keep watching here, but like we've been saying, we're really not too concerned right now. No need to panic. We may see this eventually turn into a depression and possibly become patty. But overall, we're not looking at any sort of imminent impact for the United States, and still a lot of rain in the Caribbean. So some concerns there when it comes to flooding. But like Rebecca was saying, many of those islands are built to handle the rain. So overall, we're not too concerned right now. And looking beyond this, it doesn't look like we're going to see a ton more activity going into the last part of hurricane season here. Not to say we can't have anything, but things are looking like they're finally starting to quiet down in this final stretch here.
We hope it's a quiet month of November, but our episodes continue in November every Tuesday, 12:30 Eastern, 11:30 Central, right here on whatever app, website, or social media platform that you're watching right now, as well for our podcast listeners that might be listening in the car, or the weather geeks out there listening to Tracking the Tropics. Yes, our episodes continue every Tuesday throughout the month of November, all the way through to the conclusion of the 2024 Atlantic hurricane season, with, of course, the meteorologists here at WFLA and our featured meteorologists like Brantley joining us from across Nexstar Nation. But that'll do it for this edition of Tracking the Tropics. You can go to, of course, your Nexstar affiliated website, your news website of choice within Nexstar Nation to get the latest on this storm. But once again, no Election Day hurricane, with this potential depression moving out into the Atlantic according to the models. For Brantley and Rebecca, I'm JB. Stay safe out there, folks, and we'll see you next time on Tracking the Tropics. Be well.
Find Tracking the Tropics on these platforms. And for storm updates, the latest models, and helpful resources, visit trackingthetropics.tv.